Morning and welcome to today's Fire Up training. Before we get started, just a few important notes. If you haven't already made sure to check out our website, this is where you can find recordings of the past Fire Up trainings, product information, and other helpful resources anytime, day or night. Since today's session is being recorded, please go ahead and turn off your cameras and keep your mics muted during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go or hang out until the end where you can ask all your questions at that time. Don't forget to put our Fire Up trainings on your calendar for every Wednesday morning through March and attend as much as possible for a chance to win a Pit Boss Pellet Grill. Now, let's get started with the real reason why you're here this morning. We are excited to have Mr. Michael Musselman, NewFields Ag Principal Senior Vice President here with us, and Terry Hansen, the Director of Sales in the United States for Loam Bio, and his team with us to share the Carbon Forward program with us. So go ahead and take it away, guys.
Well, good morning, everyone, and we're excited for the opportunity to have both Terry Hansen and Jake Olson today with us. And we're introducing our new Carbon Farmer program. And we have some good products to work on corn and soybeans that build carbon in the soil by applying these fungi to the seed in a planter box product. And so this has been announced and released recently in our organization. We've been working with Loam Bio for probably close to a year and a half now in terms of rolling out a program. And Loam has done a lot of scientific work. They're an Australian company, and Terry and Jake can give you the details as we go, but they've been working on carbon for years now, and in the US, multiple years. So we've got a new product and a program that's new to us here at NewFields Ag that we're launching in private labeling. But we want you to know that they are not new to the carbon markets nor the carbon building aspects. And so they've been operating here for a period of time, and we're excited to bring this technology and innovation to your fields as we go forward. So for today, we're going to let Terry give a brief presentation. Jake's here to support the opportunity. And then after about 20 or 30 minutes, we'll get into some specific questions at the end of the presentation, and be happy to work with you. And our sales territory managers are out there available and ready to help with this program also. So Terry and Jake, you're welcome to kick it off here.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with the group here today. My name is Terry Hansen. I run the U.S. commercial operations for Loam Bio, and with us is, as mentioned, Jake Olson. He's our Loam account manager for NewFields Ag. And actually, I want to hand it over to Jake to do the presentation, and we'll both be able to answer questions and be able to hopefully build everyone's knowledge of who Loam is, what we do, and how we're here to support the NewFields business.
Good deal. Thanks, Terry. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Is everybody able to see that all right?
We just see you guys right now. Oh, here it comes. Oh, well, almost.
Let's reshare then. Give it a second.
There you go.
All righty. Well, good deal. Thanks, Terry and Michael, for the introduction. Yeah, Jake Olson, Loan Partnership Manager, based just west of the Des Moines area here in Iowa. Been at Loam for a little over 2.5 years and working on this crazy carbon space for a little over 5, and things have come a long way in a pretty short time as things change and develop. But I think what Loam is doing with the fungi and the technology that we're working on as well as the offer is something that's unique and new into the marketplace. So as we dive in, a little bit about loam before we even go into the offer. So, what loam is main goal really is when it comes down to it is about carbon. Loam makes it easier for farmers to capture stable carbon from the atmosphere to increase soil health, productivity, and profitability. And what that comes down to is really, implementing technology to grow stable carbon in the soil. And we'll talk about stable carbon here in a little bit. But Loam is an Australian company founded in 2019 by a group of Australian farmers and a somewhat crazy agronomist named Guy Webb. So it was first started as a nonprofit to really expand upon the work that Professor Peter McGee did at the University of Sydney. All of our farmers think of Australia having a little bit older, a little bit more degraded soils, and so building organic matter, building carbon in the soil was something that's really important for the success of their operation. And Professor Peter McGee had been working on researching these fungi and looking at their capabilities and what they do to the soil and how well they work with crops. And loam really was started to expand upon that research and work towards something that would be, possibly to be able to be commercialized. So loam has been operating since 2019 in Australia, and we came to the United States in 21 with our first trials across the Midwest in 2022. We also have a team in Canada, which is mostly where our carbon team resides, and looking and having a team in Brazil as well as we expand globally. But at the end of the day, loam was founded by farmers, built by farmers to find technology for farmers to bring to help build better soils. Our partnership with NewFields Ag really comes down to two different offerings. So we have the Carbon Farmer carbon program and the Carbon Former, which is going to be that fungi-based planter box treatment. We'll dive into both, but first, before we get into that, talk a little bit about how we go into market and how we actually select products that go out into our fields. So starts out with microbe isolation. We have a native microbial library of over 6,000 different fungi. We then take those, we DNA sequence them, really selecting for the highest potential. Is it safe? Is it something that we can work with and scale? And really at the end of the day, is it performing the activities and tasks that we want it to perform? We then take that into a lab. They grow in plots. We go into from planter plots into small plots into large plots, distribute those different stages. We go into commercial production. Looks like ad blocker. We didn't like ad blocker for the presentation today. All right. So here's a list of our U.S. field trials for the 2024 season. This list and locations would look somewhat similar in 25 and in 26. What we're really getting down to is we're not just placing these fungi in the most perfect scenarios across the country. We try to really get a good sample of different soil types, different crop types, different weather environments, everything we can possibly throw at the fungi to see how we learn how it can perform. So when we dive in, let's dive into the fungi itself first, and then we'll dive into the program later on. So how does the Carbon Former technology actually work? So Carbon Former is based on a dark septate endophytic fungi. It's a type of fungi that's is an endophyte. An endophyte meaning that it's growing within or within the roots themselves. So really how it's working is as that plant is growing, it's using photosynthesis, it's capturing CO2, pulling it down into the roots. And that carbon from that plant is then transported and stabilized in the soil by the fungi itself. So what we talk about is stable carbon. And that is where the fungi is really at its best and what it's actually doing. So it's stabilizing that carbon and newly formed soil aggregates within the soil. So it's acting as a basically an extension of that root mass in a hyphae network, a fungal network, where it's basically a symbiotic relationship between the plant and the fungi. So that plant is pulling in basically energy, that fungi is using that energy to help that plant then return maybe better access to nutrients, water, etc. So here's a soil particle under a electronic microscope. You can see on the left here, you have a controlled plot of soil, basically uninoculated, and on the right, you have an inoculated soil. All the little hairs and strings that you see through the soil particle here are the fungi itself, that hyphae network of fungi. And on the very right here is a close-up picture of a root. You can see the fungi and the little hairs coming off of the root itself right there, which would be our fungi working and growing alongside that root mass. But what role does carbon really play in the soil? So at the end of the day, it really comes down to soil health. There's soil benefits from building carbon. Yes, we are going to talk about monetizing and creating an asset or a carbon credit later on here in the presentation. But carbon has a lot of tangible benefits within the soil itself. Improve soil structure, so increased water holding capacity, infiltration, reduced erosion, leads to higher stress tolerance, better acquisition of nutrients, and especially early in the growing season. Greater root height surface area basically increases that root surface area within that root, and then increase nutrient mobilization, so it can improve in nitrogen uptake and other important nutrients for that plant to grow. So, carbon builder, or I should say the carbon former product doesn't help directly with yield per se. And notice we won't talk about yield throughout this entire presentation, but as we are building the carbon within the soil, we do believe that these things come along with that. And so it's a one-to-one relationship. Building healthier soils, building healthier plants leads to more productivity. But not all soil carbon people. So when we look at different carbon pools in the soil, we're focused on three things. So your particulate organic carbon, your aggregate carbon, and your mineral associated carbon. And it's all about stability and permanence. And basically, how long can we prove that carbon is in that soil? So here on the left, you have your particular organic carbon, which is going to be your residue, your root mass, your leaves, etc. Days to years. So your least stable out of these three. Your aggregate carbon, which is more of a broken down version of the first. You have between decades to centuries, 10 plus years, and then your mineral associated carbon, which is also your largest pool of carbon, centuries to millennia. We can prove that there are studies that show that this pool of carbon can be upwards of over 1,000 years, and they've found carbon in soil that's been in soil for over 1,000 years. This piece is the most important when it comes to getting a more higher quality carbon price. That matters here in just a little bit. So let's talk about the carbon program itself, how we differentiate, what the offer is, and how we can go to market with something a little bit different than other programs in the marketplace. One thing that we wanted to take a look at when we're developing the program was what has worked and what has not worked for other programs in the marketplace, and how can we differentiate ourselves and really be that farmer first option. So, some of the things that we heard from our farmers when we were talking about building the program, and even our own experiences, are things like additionality. Many carbon programs in the marketplace would require somebody to implement a as in no-till or crops for the first time, or adding manure or something like that for the first time. A lot of farmers have already been doing these practices, whether whether they started 40 years ago or 3 years ago, it didn't really matter. They missed out on that additionality. They couldn't do any more, whether they were already doing it or just agronomically didn't make sense. They wanted to know what their carbon credits were actually worth, or they thought they were worth more based on some of the things that they were doing. So, you know, what kind of asset are you generating in a carbon program? Is it tangible? Is it tradable? Is it worth something to a company other than the one putting the program on? You know, some programs out there, especially early on, were asking for 20-year commitments and signing a contract. And I don't know about what farming looking the length of contracts and what they were actually getting into, and really what kind of asset they were producing and what that asset was actually worth. So we took all of that feedback and kind of created our building blocks to carbon markets and how we differentiate ourselves from other carbon programs. First off, independent focus. When we win, you win, and vice versa. So we're really sitting on the same side of the table as a farmer here. So, when we think about developing products and putting products in the marketplace, the more carbon that we can build for the farmer, and building carbon in the soil. So the better we can do that, align. Now, but what's happening in your field. We're going to go out and take samples. We're going to be able to prove what we're building, how much we're building, and how much of it is in that higher price point of credits. Owning and control your carbon credits may be the biggest differentiator in terms of how we go to market with the carbon program. So own and control your carbon credits. What does that actually mean? So if you want to, after you generate your carbon credits, if you want to put it in those quote, that's totally up to you. Take advantage of selling that asset, but in terms of how you manage that asset, is just like how you'd manage any other crop. You wait and sell, or that's control of the farmer. The ease of entry into carbon markets, we talked about additionality, but basically meet the requirement of additionality without changing much within your operation, right? We're doing a flowability agent, a planter box treatment already. This is easy to incorporate into the operation without changing much, from an agronomic standpoint, which is a no-till or a cover crop. Novel product offering. There's no other product in the market that builds carbon like Carbon Former does. It's unique in that setting, and it's unique from a fungi itself. The premium high-value carbon credits. So stable carbon leads to a higher price. Essentially, the longer we can prove that that's carbon is staying in the soil, is then going to increase that carbon credit price to a buyer. Also backed by a third-party registry. So for those of you who don't know what a carbon registry is, it's basically a governing body somewhat similar to the Federal Reserve. So let's say if I were to give you a dollar bill, you could take that dollar bill and go spend that dollar at the store, and everybody would be aware of what that dollar bill is actually worth. Somewhat similar in a carbon credit. If that credit is certified by a registry, the buyer knows what they're buying, and basically assumes that it's meeting different criteria to become a carbon credit. They track the generation and retirement of those credits and transfer of those credits as well. So how does the carbon program work? We know that consumer demand for lowering CO2 is increasing. You have, over 80% of the Fortune 1000 companies saying that they need to, reduce their emissions or meet net zero by 2050, something along those lines. So we know that consumer demand for lowering CO2 is there. We also know that we can store a lot of carbon in the soil, and Carbon Former can help increase stable soil carbon to generate carbon credits. So Carbon Former farmer measures and generates carbon credits for farmers to sell to buyers. We just talked about how we go through that process. Buyers purchase those credits to reduce their own carbon footprint, and then Loam helps sell their credits and facilitates the buyers. So, that's that demand is really there. That they are claiming, as in, for example, if you were to take an Amazon, not to say that Amazon is involved or not involved, just an easy example to pick on, they could spend billions upon billions of dollars redoing their manufacturing, their product development, their transportation, etc. But at the end of the day, that product still has to get to somebody's doorstep, and truly that aspect of their business, the part that they can't do any better, is what they're offsetting. And so when we think about AI and data centers and some of the more forward-thinking companies in the marketplace, ones really driving a lot of this demand, whether it's their employees, their consumers, or their board of directors / Wall Street. The pressure is there for these companies to hit these targets, and here in a short amount of time. So how is carbon impact actually measured? So how do we actually know what we're building within the soil? So the easiest way to say it is basically we're going to start with a baseline or a starting point, and we're going to measure where we go from there. So before you use the Carbon Former product, we would take a soil sample to see, okay, here's where we're starting from. And then in every 2 years, we're going to take another soil sample to measure basically how much we've gone up over that time frame. And 1 ton of carbon is 1 CO2 equivalent, or 1 credit, I should say. And how much is a ton of CO2? Half the size of a hot air balloon. And if you were to break it down and turn it into a solid, it would probably be about the size of your desk. So how much carbon can we store in the soil? If you put a pile of dirt or a pile of carbon that's the size of your desk, you can spread that out across an acre pretty easily. So there's a lot of potential in the soil to build additional carbon, and really how we're measuring that is at the field level as well. So we're poking holes, we're looking at this on a field level, and going from there. And really that difference is calculated to determine the impact. So talking about the soil sampling, we have a really robust soil sampling protocol. We're looking at 2 different things. So bulk density and total organic carbon. Both of those are used in the calculation to determine how many tons of carbon is there and how much are going to be stored. It's not so much a zone sample, it's not a grid sampling, it's kind of a hybridized zone. So we try to bucket areas of the field that are most similar. If you have a highly variable field, the more samples that we'll have to take. If you were to go up into, north central Iowa where it's flat and black dirt and 1 soil type across that field, you could be somewhere, in that 1 sample every 20 plus acres. If you went into where we farm in southwest Iowa, where there could be 16 different soil types and terraces and hills, you might see a sample once every 5 acres. So it's looking at soil type, moisture, pH, cropping history, the NDVI of that field, historical land management, slope, elevation. Um, there's about 80 different things that they could look at. They really focus in on about 15 to 20 of them to create those different pools within that field and to see how we're measuring. So you can see bulk density here at the top, what that looks like. All of these little dots are different soil sample points. And on the bottom here, you have your total organic carbon, very similar as well. It looks like an NDVI image or a yield map. Essentially, we're building the same thing, just with carbon. We analyze, every single soil sample to create that picture of what's happening in that field and how much carbon is being stored. We take a, physical soil core of every one of those points. They get packaged up, sent off into the lab. We're looking at that TOC and bulk density. There's also a proportion of those samples that will actually do fractionation. So fractionation is what we can actually use to prove those 3 different pools of carbon that we talked about a little bit earlier on. And that's that stable piece, the mineral associated carbon. That's the fractionation test is how we can measure how much is even moving into that pool and how much is being grown in that pool. So it's a direct measurement of stable carbon using a fractionation test. So what are the steps to actually sign up? So it's simple in terms of, how you sign up. Right now, we're looking at, signups for the 2027 season. You would sign a contract. You would create a loam account. Basically, we would collect field details such as, the shape files or, project maps of that boundary, the crop type that's going in, the legal descriptions, and then basically we would apply that carbon former product at the planting time before or after, I should say, after we would soil sample. So loam would then schedule the soil samplers to create that baseline measurement, and then we'd be collecting data over the next 2 years. It's a 5-year initial contract. We'd sample every 2 years, so you'll have 2 crediting issuances before you decide if you would like to move forward or not. After those 2 years and after that sample is taken, that farm management data and the soil samples will be used to measure the carbon storage within that field. So your yield, planting dates, crop type, tillage information, etc. There's a short audit that would be performed to verify those practices and that have actually occurred and the samples were taken and accurate. And then all of that information gets shipped off to generate those credits and issue those credits to you, the farmer. Here's another visual of what that looks like. So you have a sampling and a crediting event every other year, or every 2 years, I should say. Starts with a 5-year initial commitment, and the farmer has the ability to renew for another 5 years after that. You can opt out in the first 2 years before that first soil sampling, but you are out the cost of the product. An example of some of the data that you would need to collect, again, nothing too outside the norm, planting date, fertilizer type, yield, if you use any cover crops, etc. And with that, that is everything we have for today. Happy to take questions or anything else. Thank you.
Awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much, Jake and Terry and Michael. That was a wonderful presentation. So we will now move to our Q&A section for the next 10-15 minutes. We'll discontinue the recording at this time and encourage you to take this time to ask the experts the questions. We will answer the questions in the chat that came through. I didn't see any during the presentation, but now's the time to ask. If you think of a question at a later time, please reach out to our local NewFields Ag reseller or business development manager or contact our office. All contact information can be found on our newfieldsag.com website. And if you're planning on jumping off right now, we hope you have a blessed day and thank you for joining us.